আসসালামু আলাইকুম দর্শক, সবাইকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি আমাদের আজকের অভিমত অনুষ্ঠানে। বিশেষ একটি অভিমত অনুষ্ঠান। আমরা এই অনুষ্ঠানে বাংলাদেশের সমসাময়িক গুরুত্বপূর্ণ বিষয় নিয়ে আমাদের হাতে স্টুডিওতে আছেন। আমি প্রথমে তার সাথে পরিচয় করে দিই আপনাদের সাথে। তিনি মিস শামীম চৌধুরী। শামীম চৌধুরী একজন জার্নালিস্ট এবং রাইটার। তিনি, আপনারা যারা আল জাজিরা এবং টিআরটির চ্যানেল সম্পর্কে আমরা সবাই জানি, তিনি এই সমস্ত টেলিভিশন চ্যানেলে তিনি কাজ করেছেন। শামীম চৌধুরী, ওয়েলকাম টু দ্য শো।
থ্যাংক ইউ।
আপনি আমাদেরকে বলুন যে 5th of August কতদিন পর আপনি বাংলাদেশে গিয়েছেন to observe what's happening in Bangladesh?
এক মাস পরে. So I arrived on the, I think it was the 9th of September,
Okay.
and I was there. So very soon afterwards, the country was still in shock. In the aftermath of the events of July and August last year, it was still trying to find its feet. There was still a very big question hanging over law and order, law enforcement. Most of the police had still been in hiding. Many of them weren't back on the streets. I personally was feeling quite vulnerable when I arrived because I was there working as a solo freelancer, doing radio reports for an American network, but I didn't have the backing. As a freelancer, I didn't have the backing of any organisation with me. So the security issue was a deep concern of mine. So initially I was there for 6 weeks. I then returned to the UK and then I went back several times. Most recently was for the 1-year anniversary, and I returned back to the UK at the end of August.
So you mentioned security concern and you said আপনি এক মাস পরে গিয়েছেন এবং সেখানে there are lots of uncertainty.
Yes.
Do you think it's settled now, those uncertainties?
Not completely, no. I mean, clearly there is. I mean, what happened a few days ago in the hill tracks is an absolute tragedy. You know, unnecessarily loss of life and lots of people in hospital, and someone needs to be held accountable for those awful events. And this is an example, perhaps quite an extreme one, in the sense that thankfully there has been a big question of how much law and order has been put under control in the past 14 months or so. But this most recent incident, thankfully, is not indicative of the level of violence that we have been seeing across Bangladesh in the past 14 months or so. So clearly there is a question of security that hasn't been resolved. Absolutely, nobody can deny it. Bangladesh has a history of mob violence. We know that. There's no denying that. But I think what we need to understand is, and I do believe that the interim government, led by Chief Advisor Mohammed Yunus, has not been strong enough to, one, take action, and two, condemn the continued violence that we are seeing across the country. And this is my conclusion after having spoken to many people for quite a few months across the country. So clearly there is still an issue here. But I also think we do need to put it into some kind of context, because mob violence has existed since Bangladesh has existed. And it was as prevalent under the 15 years of the previous regime as it is now. In order to understand whether there has been an increase, we will need to check the records and check the statistics. If it is the case, and a lot of it isn't even recorded, so I don't quite know how we would do that. If it is the case that under Mohammed Yunus there has been an increase in violence across Bangladesh, then clearly on this issue the government has failed. But I can't comment on that without knowing whether there's an increase or decrease. Yeah, without knowing the statistics. Even if there isn't an increase, then certainly I think the interim government really needs to take a stronger stance on the continued violence across the country.
What was your expectation when you visited Bangladesh post 5th August? What you wanted to see there?
I really didn't know what to expect, if I'm honest with you. I mean, this is unprecedented.
I mean, many people wanted to see, for example, those who are probably they probably didn't visit Bangladesh for many years for political reasons, for there is no interest. I mean, they had numerous experiences that actually barred them to go back to Bangladesh. Yes. After 5th August, many people, hundreds of people visited Bangladesh, and they had some expectation. Some just wanted to see how people react.
Yes.
Some people wanted to see whether or not there are political kind of stability. Some wanted to see, okay, for business purposes, of course, there were huge, money laundering issues in the last 15 years.
Yes.
Whether or not the opportunity is there to do something in Bangladesh. What was your expectation?
I think the first two, definitely I wanted to get a sense of how people were feeling. I mean, as a journalist, the first thing you want to do is speak to people and find out, what they're thinking about this. So absolutely, that was number one on my list of priorities.
And that led me to ask you the next question.
Yes.
What is, I mean, of course, in Bangladesh, there is huge societal differences among
Yes.
different groups of people. If you go to the local market, you speak to shopkeepers.
Yes.
You have some level of expectation. If you go to Gulshan, there is another level of expectation. If you go to Dhaka Reporters Unity or Dhaka Press Club, you have got different experience. So, who did you meet?
Everyone. I met a cross-section of people. I was speaking to people selling, when I would buy my coconut juice from,
Yep.
market
Local
stall sellers, I would strike up conversations with them. I was using Uber a lot. I would always strike up conversations with the very intelligent and very well-informed Uber drivers. I spoke to Abu Said's parents. You all know Abu Said is the young man who was killed at point-blank range by Hasina's forces. I travelled all the way up to Rangpur, met his parents, and spoke at length with them. I spoke to two of the most prominent people who had been illegally enforced disappearance
Yep.
victims, Abdullahi Amani, the former Brigadier General,
Yep.
and
Very
some others
sound.
as well. Yeah, so I didn't actually speak to Michael Chakma. I would have loved to have spoken to him, but unfortunately I didn't have time.
Okay.
But I spoke to others as well. So a complete, the lady who would come to clean my house, I would speak to her. So a complete cross-section of society. And one conclusion that I can come to this is, regardless of whatever status they held in society, whatever their roles were, one thing everybody was in agreement with was that she had to go. The uprising had to happen. There was nobody. Now, you can argue, well, those who, did support it have gone into hiding. Of course, that is the case. But really, I mean, I can conclude that whatever the failings of the current interim government are, and there are some, nobody can deny that,
She had to go.
She had to go. There was no question about it. She had to go. So that really is the abiding conclusion that I have come to from the very beginning, weeks after I arrived in Bangladesh and 1 year on. That hasn't changed.
So, if you have to choose, what could be the three main reasons for her to, for people to think that she had to go? What are the three main reasons that you found out that these are the three reasons? For that reason, she had to go.
The silencing of political opponents, the most extreme cases being the enforced disappearances, which, there can be no response to that,
Yeah,
really.
of course,
Aina God, the House of Mirrors, journalists have seen them. We've had countless first-hand accounts of people who are actually detained. That is one. That is the extreme end of a sustained oppression of opposition groups that we have been seeing pretty much, I would say, probably not at the very start of her rule back in 2008, I think it was. But certainly, in most recent years, we've seen that. We've seen her forces open fire on protests, peaceful protests. We've seen we saw that in the lead up to the last elections in October 2023, I think it was, when tens of thousands of opposition members, opposition supporters were arrested. Human rights groups have documented this regularly. So that's I would say is the one thing. The other thing, it has to be the corruption. When the interim government came into took control of the country in the aftermath of the uprising, one of the first things they had to do in order for the country to literally become bankrupt is somehow find the funds to keep the banks propped up, because so much unsecured loans had been taken out, and to prevent the IMF from imposing huge loans. But worse than that, even if that had been the case, there was a big risk that if the country was on the brink of bankruptcy, there would have been further protests on the street, most likely further bloodshed, and what the whole country wanted to avoid was the military actually stepping in and taking over. So Bangladesh has been under civilian rule, albeit very dubious, for many, many years. And it is proud of the fact that it's been under civilian rule for, more than 15 years now, for, 2 decades now. And it wants to maintain that. Bangladesh is not Egypt. It's not Pakistan, where the military is all powerful. So, so certainly the corruption, certainly the looting of, the money, from the coffers of Bangladesh's treasury and the banks and all of that. That is one of them. And I would also say, in terms of economic progress, there has been a lot of mismanagement. There was a time when, we have to be fair, Sheikh Hasina was doing, most people would say, reasonably well. She's never been perfect. No ruler is ever perfect. But there was a period. But the country was doing. But that was also because the country was doing
in developing the country.
Absolutely, yes, economically. But then you have to look at it from outside Bangladesh as well. It was kind of there was the global economy was buoyant, and Bangladesh was receiving that, was feeling the benefits of that. But since the global downturn, since the pandemic, I think there's been a serious mismanagement in terms of the economy, and a lot of people have suffered. Food prices have gone up. So those would be my three reasons.
Right. Okay. So coming back to Sheikh Hasina. What's going to be her future?
Well, I think it's very unfortunate that the international community is not putting more pressure on India to ensure that Bangladesh's extradition order is honoured. On this particular issue, it seems as though the international community, and by the international community, we really are talking about the most powerful countries in the world. We're talking about the European Union and America. They tend to have the most clout on these issues. I don't think they're too concerned. I mean, their reaction has been this is an issue between India and Bangladesh. It's a bilateral issue. I don't really think. I think they've got bigger fish to fry. I think they've got far more important things they would say to think about than than Sheikh Hasina, this despotic leader of Sheikh Hasina being what is in it for them? There's nothing in it for them. They're quite happy with Muhammad Yunus being in power. He is the darling of the West. We know that. Friends with the Obamas, Nobel laureate, all of that. Very kind of beloved. Of the West. So, I think, I think as far as the powerful nations in the world are concerned, they are really not bothered. I think we do have, certainly India has a moral obligation. She stands accused of crimes against humanity. The UN said that 1,400 people were killed in the 6 weeks of the uprising. 13% of them were children. I've spoken to parents of some of those children. There's a young boy who was 4 years old, Ahad. His father, these people will have to find some way of finding consolation of their children being killed. She does have a lot to answer for. There is ample evidence to suggest that, all her forces had been completely politicized. They were taking, I'm sure you've seen the documentaries where, there is recorded, and the recording has been authenticated by experts, where she's giving direct orders. So there is absolutely a legal and moral duty for India to hand over someone who has blood on her hands, quite frankly. Whether they do or not is another matter. I think I agree with you. I can't see it happening.
So what will be her future? Do you see there are many people in Bangladesh, by the way, Bangladesh and abroad, especially her loyal supporters. They think she will return one day and she will lead the party.
Maybe she will. Stranger things have happened. I can't comment on that because I can't predict the future. I hope that doesn't happen. It will be a sad day for democracy. I think despite, my sense is that despite the, many challenges that the interim government has faced over the past 14 years, and it's been, criticised quite a lot, quite a lot of it justified, I would agree with. Not all of it, but I would say absolutely, it is ruling the country, it's unelected, and it needs to be held to account. But we have to bear in mind that it had 15 years of mess to clear up. It is, people's expectations were really high. I really got the sense within, a month of being there, people were like, oh, well, this hasn't happened, and that hasn't happened, and this hasn't happened. And I'm like, hang on a second, it's going to take a lot of work to get Bangladesh properly back on its feet. I think, to answer your question, if somewhere down the line we see her coming back and, taking the reins again, I think it would be really sad. I think she needs to be,
Do you see a possibility?
It's really hard for me to answer that question.
What is your assessment? You've seen Bangladesh.
I will, and this is obviously, not, I certainly can't predict into the future. I would like to think that, but also we need to bear in mind she's in her 70s now. It's not like when she came back in the 90s when she was a young woman.
75 plus.
Yeah, so she's 75 plus. Yeah. When you say, is she going to come back? What, is she going to come back when she's 85 years old, 90 years old? I don't think it's possible. I don't think she's going to come back.
Well, if it is due to her age, that's a separate matter. But if, for example...
Is the party going to revive itself?
Yep.
Yes, I think it will at some point.
Okay.
Yes, I think it will.
All right, we have to go to a break. When it comes to minority, or when it comes to the indigenous people of Hill Tracts or Sylhet region, all political parties are same. This is what exactly she said. Why is that? Why do you think it's... I mean, আমরা বছরের পর বছর এই যে ইস্যুটাকে পলিটিক্যাল গ্রুপগুলি একইভাবে ট্রিট করে যাচ্ছে।
And Bangladesh is the only country exclusive in, I mean, this is the cynicism of mainstream politics, isn't it? We see it. They court minority groups. They say the right things when they need their votes and when they need to have them on their sides. And this is not being cynical, me being cynical. This is the reality of politics. So what we're seeing in Bangladesh is... how we see politics being played out in many countries in the world. It's nothing new, but what we need to bear in mind is that the Awami League have one of their kind of they have weaponized the issue of minority vulnerability in Bangladesh, which to some degree or other has always been there. Sometimes better than other times. Yep. My mother is from the area of Sri Mongol, which has always had a very large concentration. Very it's 50% Hindu.
Yes.
And her best friend was Hindu when she was a young girl, and there was harmony, between the ethnic groups and all the rest of it. But obviously that hasn't been the case. But I just want to illustrate in this particular case the kind of disingenuous rhetoric that the Awami League has been putting out on the issue of minority groups. And I have to stress at this point that I'm a British citizen. I have no, political kind of... I have
views,
no...
yes.
Yeah, I really am objective. I really
Absolutely,
am neutral.
Yeah.
So I can really... I can form my conclusions from the people that I spoke to and my own research and my own kind of having covered the country for many, many years. And I met this young student who studies at Jahangir University.
Jahangirnagar University.
Jahangirnagar University, yes.
Right, yeah. It's quite tough.
It is, it is. And she's Hindu. Okay. And I think she's 21 or 22. And she took part in the protests to oust Sheikh Hasina. And she stands by her decision. And she is very passionate, highly intelligent young girl who I was really, really impressed with, as I was with so many of the students that I met and spoke to across Bangladesh. I mean, really, they're just so inspiring as a generation. But what she said was very interesting. What she said was that now we are seeing, the Awami League trying to stir up tensions in Bangladesh among minority groups and trying to make out that they supported, that they are the party for the Hindus. Her own grandfather's house was confiscated by the Awami League and seized from him and used as a regional headquarters office. Okay. Now, I interviewed her. I have it on tape. This is what she told me. So she said this idea that the Awami League, has been the party of the Hindus and the minority groups is absolutely not the case, certainly not in her experience. But at the same time, she feels that the current government, Muhammad Yunus came with all the promises, we're going to protect all of, Bangladesh's minority groups, minority religions and all the rest of it. And she said, we haven't seen that. We have seen continued violence. And yes, we have to make the point here that some of the violence was not necessarily because of their religion. It was more because of their political affiliations. So there is that point that we need to bear in mind. But nonetheless, minority groups still don't feel safe in Bangladesh. They feel like the Yunus interim government has renegated on its promises, and they feel that they have been left to fend for themselves. So that's my observations on where we're at in Bangladesh, very broadly, in terms of how minority groups are feeling.
You've interviewed the student leaders, those who campaigned for the revolution, took part in the revolution, led the revolution. And I think you have said you interviewed Nahid Islam as well.
I did, yes.
What
I had
was-
an hour-long interview with him.
Right, and what did he say? Was he the part of the government at that time, or
No.
he quit the government?
He'd quit the government and he was just about starting...
The new party?
Yes, the NCP, yes.
What was his expectation post 5th August, and what did he say? How does he want to see the country going?
So I think, first and foremost, his expectations were very realistic.
Okay.
He is not expecting, like 3 months down the line, for this party that's come out of nowhere to suddenly change the political landscape of Bangladesh. Dynastic politics has been the defining feature of Bangladeshi politics since its birth since the end of military rule, really. So he's very realistic about that. And he said to me that our vision is long-term. It's, we may or may not get 1 or 2 seats
in this
elections. We understand that. But for us, this is just the beginning. This is where it ends. And what he said is, more than anything, we want to ensure that there is a healthy opposition in the Bangladeshi parliament, something that Bangladesh hasn't seen for many, many years. We want a healthy and robust opposition, and we want a party that is progressive and centrist. Now, I know there's a bit of a, many may say that they have turned out to be not quite so centrist a party, but I'm just telling you what he told me.
Yeah.
But what we really want to ensure is that that Bangladesh is a whole lot more politically transparent, and that there is a choice now that never existed before. Ultimately, they want to see an end to dynastic politics, which, we have been talking about the Awami League, but we also know historically the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which is the second largest party in Bangladesh, has been accused during its time in power of the very things that the Awami League has been accused of. Maybe not quite to that extent, but certainly corruption, certainly opposition, silencing opposition views. And I think generally, I think the National Bureau of Statistics in Bangladesh says something like 29.5% of Bangladesh's population is under the age of 29.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look under the age of 40, that's probably going to be around 50-60%.
Yep.
That is more
Huge.
than half the country. They weren't around when 1971 happened. They weren't around when Bangladesh became independent. They are interested in it from a historic perspective. They don't want Bangladesh's history to be erased, of course, but they are progressive. They are not as emotionally connected to the events of 1971 as perhaps the older generation is. They're bored of it, quite frankly. They want to move on. They want Bangladesh to move with the times, become a progressive nation and have clear, transparent and representative democratic policies. That is essentially what he wants. Whether that happens or not, we're going to have to wait and see. We have to remember that the NCP doesn't have anywhere near the financial backing that some of these major parties have. They're established parties. Jamaat has a lot of financial backing. We know that. All of the parties do. So they are contending with that. But what they have on their side is a new generation of Bangladeshis who, quite frankly, are fed up of the kind of politics that they've had to put up with for decades, and they want something fresh and they want something new, and they're prepared to work for it, and they are highly intelligent and with lots of energy and very, very motivated.
Have you met anyone from Jamaat Islami?
I haven't, actually, although I have spoken...
What is your view on their activities? Obviously, post 5th August, they became the most active political forces in Bangladesh at this moment, and they have taken Dhaka University student election took place, and they have taken majority seats.
Well, if that, my view is, if that's the will of the people, then fair enough. If you believe in democracy, then whatever ideological views a particular party is espousing.
Yeah, of course. But
because for me to say, well, actually, I don't agree with those results, is basically putting conditions on the democratic process, is it not?
Is Bangladesh ready, or even the region, the Southeast Asian region, or even ready for a political party based on religious belief, or those who wants to establish Sharia law in the country? That's in their constitution, law of Allah. Is Bangladesh ready for that?
Right. We have to understand that Bangladesh is a conservative country. It's a religiously conservative.
That's
You
correct,
move
yeah.
away. I mean, the only, you know,
But
the
Bangladesh
secular is...
is religiously conservative, but at the same time, people don't want to impose. People want to see.
I agree.
That you know, certain things are imposed on them.
I agree. And historically, you will know that Jamaat has never really had beyond, 9% of the elections at any...
Yeah,
at
of
any
course, yeah. I
given
mean,
it's not really, it hasn't really made much headway, you know, in terms of the political process. We know it has financial clout. You know,
they've got a huge student wing.
They have a
very
huge student wing.
productive kind of workforce.
Now, I mean, it's not for me as a British citizen to say Bangladesh is ready for this or ready for that. It is not for me to say that. It's not my place to say that. But what we do know, and if Mohammed Yunus keeps his word, then these elections coming up in February will be the most transparent, the fairest elections that Bangladesh has ever witnessed. If under that scenario, people go to the ballot box and they vote for Jamaat or whoever it may be, and there is no disputing over the results, then those who advocate democracy will have to accept that result. And I will have to accept it. Now, my personal views doesn't come into it. My personal views are irrelevant here. You know, whether I think,
have you seen any appetite for... look, they played a huge part in 5th August. And I think their supporters or activists sacrificed their lives.
Yes, they did. They did.
So, and they were shot. Their activities were shot for the last 15 years during Awami League time. And they also claim that their leaders, the top leaders, were kind of assassinated by the previous regime in the name of ICT Act, International Crimes Tribunal Act.
Yeah.
So they had huge grievance as well, but at the same time, they have shown the political maturity in terms of how to keep their political activism going during harsh kind of time of Sheikh Hasina regime. And they sustain, and they are now kind of, whatever they are doing, they're becoming successful.
Okay, but can I ask you?
Dhaka University,
absolutely.
Jahangirnagar University, there are multiple other university student union elections. They're predicting they will take all over all the university
But they're not
campuses.
actually, I'm not going to ask you what your personal views are on Jamaat, and I'm not going to tell you my personal views on Jamaat, because I think it's irrelevant, actually. And
I think it will be really interesting to have an...
I don't really want to...
Have your opinion, not opinion, observation, I would say.
I don't really want to go into whether I support, religious conservative, any religious conservative government or not. I would really rather not do that. These are my, that's my political view. But what I'm asking you is, if they are not doing anything wrong in terms of their campaigning and, they're kind of winning over hearts and minds of people in Bangladesh, and, they're doing everything by the book, and you know that they have some really very, very intelligent people in the upper echelons of the party, and they know, they know the country, they know the political, social and economic landscape. If they are capitalizing on that to their advantage, there's nothing, they're not actually doing anything wrong.
They're not. No.
They're not.
No.
It's the same in the UK. We may not, many of us may not support the Reform Party, but if they aren't actually breaking any rules, and if they are gaining momentum, and they are...
Who are we to stop them?
We can't say, well, actually, you've won 30% of the votes, but we don't accept it. There's nothing we can do. There is really nothing we can do. But I will say this, that, I know, they haven't... As I mentioned, they've never really made much headway on the political platform in the past.
On the ground?
On the ground. No, in the ballot box. In the ballot box.
Course, yeah.
So let's see what happens. The general feeling is that... the general feeling is that come the February election, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party is going to win. That's what seems to be the feeling. We may be surprised.
Yeah.
We may find... Given the evidence that we've been seeing over the past kind of few months or so, perhaps a little bit longer, we are. It can't be denied that we are seeing a shift to religious conservatism in terms of Bangladeshi politics. Religious conservatism, we are seeing that. We can't deny it. But let's see. Let's wait and see. If I don't really think we can speculate until the elections take place and until those results. And if those results are free and fair, which I suspect they will be, then whatever the results are, we have to accept it. Just like here in the UK, we accepted Brexit.
Do you think the next election will be without Sheikh Hasina and Aomi League?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they've made that clear. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the party is banned. Its activities are banned.
Activities are banned, yes.
But it means it's banned. So yes, of course, absolutely, it's going to go ahead without the Awami League. Yes.
And do you think that the people of Bangladesh will accept the election that the February election is actually a free, fair, transparent, and inclusive election without Awami League?
So I think it will be transparent. Because all eyes are going to be on these elections, not just Bangladesh, but the world's eyes are going to be on these elections, especially given what's happened. It will mark a start of a new political era for Bangladesh. Now, this is a very difficult, and I do have an element of sympathy with the interim government on this. How insensitive do you think it would look? Just a year and a half after, the Awami League has been accused, senior members has been accused of some of the most awful crimes Bangladesh has ever experienced. According to the UN, 1,400 people killed, as I mentioned earlier. Many of them have fled or gone underground. How insensitive do you think it's going to seem if just a year and a half down the line, the trials haven't finished, they're still ongoing, for, the powers that be turn around and say, well, okay, well, never mind, the trials are still ongoing, but we'll let them stand.
There is also counter debate. Okay, those who are accused, trial them, but not the political party, because there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of political activists, those who are innocent, and they need a political platform. Where would they go without a political platform? I mean, can Bangladesh, ban Awami League and ban all the supporters? And what would the supporters then do? Going underground and creating, further chaos and anarchy?
I think this is a compelling argument. I agree with you. I think, hundreds of thousands of people took to the street. It's still very, very sensitive. Emotions are still running very high in Bangladesh.
On both sides, yeah.
I think the interim government is in a very difficult position where it has to tread very, very carefully on this particular issue with the Awami League. And it needs to make some hard choices. And on balance, and I take your point, it's a very, very good point. And on balance, I think, given that it is very soon after what happened, I think it probably is right. You're right, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a fair election, because it was a very popular party. There's no denying that. Historically, it's been a very popular party, and it played a very significant an important role in the creation of Bangladesh and in the aftermath. Despite what people in Bangladesh would like to say now, it's been one of Bangladesh's main political parties since Bangladesh came into existence. But I would say that given the magnitude of what happened, given that why don't some of these members come back and do the right thing and stand trial? You know what I mean?
Of course. Everybody wants that.
Come and make amends.
Of course, yeah.
Come and stand trial.
আমাদের সময় প্রায় শেষ। আমাদের অনুষ্ঠান প্রত্যাশা করতে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ। 30 সেকেন্ডে আপনি বলবেন যে বাংলাদেশকে ঘিরে আপনার প্রত্যাশা। Your expectation post 5th August about Bangladesh.
My expectations are, my hopes, I'm going to tell you about my hopes, that there will be free and fair elections, and that those who are perpetrators of the crimes of last summer are held to account and face justice, and Sheikh Hasina comes back and faces justice. I know this is not going to happen. And I just want to see, the brave Gen Z generation that, sparked interest all over the world and have the respect of all over the world. I really want them to continue to have a say in Bangladesh. And, as someone of Bangladeshi ancestry, I want to see a prosperous and, progressive Bangladesh.
অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ। দর্শক, দেখছিলেন অভিমত অনুষ্ঠান। আমরা কথা বলছিলাম শামীম চৌধুরী এবং মন্টি চাকমার সাথে বিভিন্ন গুরুত্বপূর্ণ বিষয় নিয়ে। আশা করি অনুষ্ঠান আপনারা উপভোগ করেছেন। দেখা হবে আগামী অনুষ্ঠানে। এই প্রত্যাশা আজকের মতো এখানে শেষ করছি। সবাই ভালো থাকবেন। আসসালামু আলাইকুম।